What didn't you believe until you experienced it? Story 1. Before I had brain surgery, my neurosurgeon said the worst side effect afterwards would be fatigue. Fatigue? I scoffed. How bad can it be? Fast forward to after the surgery, and I didn't bother making my bed for 6 weeks because I was never out of it for longer than a couple of hours. Folding the laundry led to me having to take a 2-hour nap afterwards. Story 2. How radically different life above versus below the poverty line is. It was 2 really bad years of my life, and I had 2 young children too. So many decisions were made differently because there was no money to solve problems with. Story 3. How much worse an actual flu is compared to a common cold. I always thought that a flu is just like a little more intense cold, but it is so much worse. You might have chills that are multiplying, fever, achy bones, headaches, and feel weak. I mean, there are thousands of people dying every year from a flu. Story 4. If you had told me that there's a small town where the restaurants, bars, and delis are all so mediocre to bad that their fast food places are where you go to get higher quality food, I wouldn't have believed it. But then, I stopped in Fort Stockton, Texas for a night. Story 5. I visited my father in South Carolina last summer for a week of vacation. While there, he told me about this wild place called Buc-ee's. Said it was like if a gas station was the size of a Costco, and he went on about how there was like 100 gas pumps outside, and an entire deli counter dedicated solely to beef jerky, amongst other wild things. Now, Buc-ee's hadn't expanded outside of Texas yet the last time I was out in SC, and my father is prone to exaggeration anyway, so I assumed it was just that and blew it off. About a day later, we were on the road down to Florida, as our big plan was to visit Kennedy Space Center for a few days, which is when I saw Buc-ee's own particular roadside advertisement scheme for the first time. IY quack. We stopped to visit my stepsister and her family in Jacksonville, and he told her that I didn't believe him about Buc-ee's. She proceeded to affirm his claims, but I still wasn't convinced when we got back on the road. Surely there's no such thing, right? It's an absolute load of crap. My dad's just pulling my leg, and my stepsister is in on it. Whatever. Well, lo and behold, we make it to Daytona Beach, Florida, which has its very own Buc-ee's location. Dad made a point of pulling off the freeway to stop for gas, and as we crossed the overpass, that's when I saw it. Gas pumps as far as the eye can see right next to a Costco-sized building plastered with Buc-ee, the beaver's face, right on the front. I was dumbstruck, and my father was giggling his ass off at me. We stopped, got gas, and as I was wondering how I was going to tell him that I wanted to go inside, he told me that going inside was non-negotiable. So we did go inside, and in that moment I understood why the South is so faithfully religious, as I now bore witness to the promised land. I shall not say more, as I truly believe that every man, woman, non-binary fellow and child on this planet should be graced with the experience that is walking into a Buc-ee's for the first time without me spoiling it. I brought word of this wonderful place back home to my friends in the PNW, and now it's a road trip bucket list plan, if we ever find the time and capability to do so. I did not believe my father's claims about Buc-ee's until I experienced it, and I have never been more glad to be wrong before or since then. Story 6. I didn't really understand why women were so scared of men. Until one assaulted me, now I completely get it. I always thought they were playing it up and trying to act as a victim, but the physical strength differences and the way some men can manipulate you is truly terrifying. I love men. I am just scared of them in a lot of different situations. Story 7. I was prescribed opioids after I had my wisdom teeth taken out. I was honestly a bit worried about taking them due to all the stories. Took them. And while they did make me not feel any pain at all, I also never once felt any euphoria, the feeling of being hugged by God, or anything you're supposed to feel while on recreational drugs. They just got rid of the pain, and that was it. I could function perfectly normally, both mentally and physically. I finished out my prescription and never craved more, or even felt tempted to take more than the dose for the 2 weeks or so I had to take them. Maybe I didn't take enough? I've told people that story, and they all said my experience wasn't normal. They all felt some sort of euphoria or general amazing feeling, even after just taking a single pill, and they understood immediately why people got addicted so quickly. I really think my body just processes drugs differently. Story 8. This is a very small one, but bursting into tears. It always seemed like a silly expression to me, like, of course you know when you're about to cry. You don't just go from 0 to crying with no warning. Until I did. Very weird sensation. Story 9. The VA system. As a civilian and active duty soldier, I had heard it was F'd up, but thought it couldn't be that bad, but figured people were exaggerating. Then navigating the paperwork once I was a vet was what I would equate to filing the most complicated tax return conceivable, whilst dealing with a super complicated mortgage application bundled in. Vets who are shot out with PTSD could never navigate all that, plus the appointments, and then the care, waiting 8+ hours at a hospital. Having meds just never come by mail, getting lost, etc. I told one doc, I think this med has a bad interaction with this other med you gave, and in front of me he pulled up Wikipedia, turned the screen to me and said, "Oh, it says right here you're right. It says it can cause kidney failure." Story 10. That an employer would withhold feedback to put you on a PIP. I'm probably getting off that PIP since I fixed the issue she never told me about, but the trust is still broken. She had apparently been hinting at me to fix it, but never told me direct. Story 11. Until I experienced it myself, I didn't believe the profound impact that meditation could have on mental well-being. Initially skeptical, I assumed it was just a trendy practice. However, after committing to daily meditation sessions, I felt a noticeable improvement in my stress levels, clarity of mind, and overall sense of inner peace. It taught me the power of mindfulness and the importance of taking time for self-care. This first-hand experience transformed my perspective and solidified my belief in the effectiveness of meditation as a tool for managing stress and promoting mental health. Story 12. How bad public special education is. I think a lot of people are taught, but the more severe the disability, the more support you get. I have profoundly autistic children, meaning they are minimally speaking, even with different modalities of communication. They also test with IQs close to or under 50. My oldest is 9. The things he faced in public school are tough to recount. A teacher assaulted him and his classmates after spending months routinely exploding at and screaming at them, which caused significant medical symptoms in him, which were misdiagnosed. He didn't learn. The school said this was okay and his fault. They didn't teach life skills. They said they weren't concerned about that. Yikes. They claimed he could not read or recognize letters. I taught him, so I knew that was BS. My younger child was in a classroom with extremely unsafe conditions. You don't know vicious until you have a dispute in special education. File a state complaint or go to due process, and you'll see what animals they are. It's a costly, bureaucratic nightmare. My kids are now homeschooled and never going back. 20 to 40% of homeschoolers have a disability. We have found microschooling setups and learning pods to be much more accommodating. My oldest just took the CAT and had scores in reading and language ranging from 55th to 95th percentile. He did great, and I'm so proud of him. So much for being illiterate. If your child cannot be in a general education classroom, and if you are committed to doing the work, I think it is better to homeschool. I've met too many adults who graduated with a certificate of completion instead, whose educations topped out at a very early elementary level, sometimes kindergarten. Story 13. Migraine. My wife gets them from time to time, and for a few years I thought, okay, it's a headache, just pop some ibuprofen and get on with stuff, and didn't really understand why she had to basically spend the next 48 hours in bed recovering when she got one. For the record, I never criticized her for it. I was always supportive, just quietly confused. Then I had one myself. Ooh, boy. It was most definitely not just a headache. Even though the one I had was on the mild side, I can definitely appreciate at least some of how absolutely crushingly debilitating it must be to get bad ones. Thankfully, it was a one-off, touch wood, not something I'm keen to ever revisit. Story 14. I didn't truly believe that weight issues were sometimes affected by hormones, illness, or genetics severely. I used to be 100 pounds and super skinny. I was active and I ate well and attributed my success to that. I got to about 25 and gained 200 lbs. I was still super active and eating healthy. Turns out I have multiple factors running into my weight. I'm 100 pounds lighter and still trying to lose the weight. It's a struggle with chronic pain, PCOS, genetic factors, and trying to balance life. I've just stopped judging other people's walks in this life. Story 15. Not me, but about a dozen people I know. Total solar eclipse. My wife is a great example. I knew about this eclipse for the last 7 years, and I've been talking about it and planning the trip for quite some time. Initially, she didn't want to come with me, since I was going to have to drive about 8 hours to reach the path of totality. What's the big whoop? So it's gonna get dark. It gets dark at home every freaking night. Why are you making me go to this? But I kept at her, and she eventually caved and came with me. And she was a total 100% convert afterwards. She was blown away, amazed, and now is telling everyone what a transformative experience it was. I asked her, "Babe, what would you tell someone who felt like you? What would you tell someone who doesn't believe the hype? How would you convince them to get excited about it?" And she has no answer. There is nothing that would have convinced her other than seeing it. Story 16. I had studied Pompeii after my grandfather taught me about it, but until I visited the city a year after studying it and beholding Vesuvius, I couldn't believe that such a force of nature buried a city. I, of course, was only 7 when I first learned of it, and didn't see it till year later. Story 17. I fully believed that people made it up, and that they were just whispering. Then one day I got really sick and tried to talk and nothing came out of my mouth. Shouting as loud as I possibly could had my voice only a little louder than a whisper. It shocked me to experience it and realize that it really was a thing. Okay, thank you. Story 18. Meditation benefits. It took me a bit to get to the point that I could actually do it. Teaching your brain to stop thinking so fast is difficult when most of the time you're doing the opposite. But it can be done, and I found I was less stressed and slept better on days when I did it. My doc says my blood pressure improved too. Story 19. That damn gold blue dress. I see blue every time I look at it, and couldn't understand how anyone saw white and gold. Just one time I saw it as white and gold for a split second. When I looked again, it was blue, but I could finally understand how people saw white. Story 20. A migraine. Never really understood what people meant when they called in sick for work with a migraine. I would just work through my headaches, until one day I couldn't see what was on TV. I tried to focus, and it just wasn't working. Everything was blurry. I felt like I was going blind. It made me feel sick. I just wanted to sleep. Story 21. My dad got hit by a semi on a bridge at almost 40 mpg. This bridge dips down at the end, so you can't see backed up traffic if you don't know the road. Semi-braked up. Dad looked up when he heard the brakes and let go of his own so his vehicle could absorb the impact. Both lived. If 2 men hadn't reacted exactly how they should, my dad could have died. My dad's truck wasn't even badly damaged. They had to replace parts of the bed. I now understand why people believe in miracles. Story 22. The hype over a total eclipse. My wife is from Cleveland and we made the trip a couple weeks ago. I was just along for the ride and not really excited. It was basic fun to have a picnic and watch the shadow creep through protective glasses. But those 3 minutes of 100% totality blew my mind. It was like a magic trick went off before my eyes. The corona appeared in an instant, growing 3 times the size of what I had been looking at for an hour prior. I could see stars and Venus and a brilliant 360-degree sunset on the horizon. The temperature dropped 20 degrees, birds went silent. I just exclaimed, "Holy shit!" in genuine surprise. Pictures can't do it justice. Even 99% coverage can't compare. It was one of the coolest things I've seen and experienced. I totally get why people make a big deal over it now. Story 23. Being frozen in fear. I saw it in movies, TV all the time, like the hero pushing someone out of the way of a speeding car, or shooting the zombie about to attack. I'm not someone who freezes. I didn't think it was real. I thought it was just a movie trope for dramatic effect. Was out to lunch with my grandfather at a pretty nice restaurant, and someone at another table choked. Everyone near him just froze up. Even the waiter just stopped in his tracks and watched. I ran over, stood him up, and gave him the Heimlich. Whatever it was popped out on the table. He thanked me, and I went back to my lunch. No one clapped, no one sent me a drink. They just went back to what they were doing. Story 24. How incredibly awful perimenopause can be, and how consistently shitty and gaslighting doctors are about it. Full body pains, joints that feel both weak and stiff, dry mouth, itchy eyes, UTIs, irritability, all manner of foods now cause cramps, bloating or nausea, brain fog, weight gain and redistribution in weird places, suicidal ideation, night sweats, rapid mood swings, sleeplessness, hot flashes, cold hands, itchy skin, everywhere, vertigo, bladder issues, complete death of libido, heart palpitations, and headaches, not to mention all the intimate issues. It's absolute hell, even with hormone replacement therapy, as I try to get the dosages right. I'm expecting to be menopausal for more of my life than I can be fertile. Yet all doctors focus on the 25 years of baby maker body and tell the women in their 50s, "Welp, you're getting old. That's just how it is. Fuck you, medical professionals." Story 25. I didn't fully believe in the transformative power of travel until I experienced it firsthand. Growing up, I always heard people talk about how travel broadens your horizons and changes your perspective. But it wasn't until I ventured out into the world myself that I truly understood the depth of those words. Exploring new cultures, meeting people from different walks of life, and immersing myself in unfamiliar environments opened my eyes in ways I never imagined. It's an experience that's difficult to fully grasp until you step out of your comfort zone and into the unknown. Story 26. I'm not sure if there's a term for it, but the way groups of people can be influenced by each other psychologically in certain situations, like the Stanford prison experiment. I was in a situation at work where a neighboring building was on fire, and our building was filling with smoke. We were told to stay in the building because we would have to keep working. We could have left at any time under our own free will, but everyone stayed because no one took the first step to leave. Later that night, some of us had to go to the ER for smoke inhalation. Looking back, it's like, why the hell did we all stay? WTF was that all about? If you told me about the situation and I hadn't been in it, I would have said I would have left in a heartbeat, but being in the situation, I stayed. Very strange. Story 27. Having zero recourse against police. I was visiting my dad in a smaller Texas town with my brothers. We went out to a bar to sing karaoke and were there for just over an hour. We called for an Uber, but after 20 minutes, Uber said no available drivers. It was just after midnight, and the hotel we were staying at was less than 2 miles away, so we decided to walk it. We were on a sidewalk, walking down a main street, when the police stopped and questioned us. Upon finding we had left a bar, they arrested us, would not allow us to do a field sobriety test, would not let us use a breathalyzer when requested, and would not let us get a blood test. They held us in jail for 14 hours before charging us with public intoxication. When we requested that the charges be dropped during our meeting with the prosecutor a month later, he told us to fuck off, that police don't need to test us, or to prove that we were drunk, as long as they say that we may have been a risk to ourselves or others. The police report stated that we were on the sidewalk, but that one of my brothers may have appeared to stumble. Story 28. A miracle. I was playing ultimate frisbee and dove for a disc. A dude ran across my ankle, twisted, bruised, and cut it from his cleats. College team. I couldn't put any weight on it. Had a friend, athletic training major, help me hop from the field all the way into the training room to get ice, a wrap, and a crutch. It was a brutal walk, about 500 yards or so. I sat in a chair and this dude came up and asked if he could pray for me. I shrugged and said, why not? His prayer was about 5-10 seconds, a simple ask for healing. He said amen and asked if it was healed. I chuckled and didn't expect any difference. But when I let my heel touch the floor, my jaw hit the floor too. I started rocking it back and forth, slowly rolling it around, bouncing it, etc. He told me to stand on it, and I stood up without pain. My friend came back in the room with a bag of ice and the crutch, and looked at me with complete confusion. I said, I'm just as dumbfounded as you. This dude just prayed for me and I'm healed. Ended up going back to practice, and everyone was confused. Had blood on my sock, but no cut. Story 29. Anxiety. I figured people were just not mentally strong enough. Then my body just started doing weird shit. I didn't even feel anxious. I was otherwise really happy, but my body kept getting dizzy and feeling like a major health episode was about to happen. Turns out you don't even have to feel anxious to experience anxiety. Your body will just force you to stop in your tracks and become physically incapable of anything else. Just because... Story 30. More like I didn't know or wasn't aware, but not necessarily that I didn't believe it. The whole experience of seizures, both conscious and unconscious. That the northern lights can be as amazing and vibrant as some people's time-lapse photos of them. Music never stops being better while stoned. Somehow the worst and/or most harmful drugs I've used were legal, and the most helpful or enjoyable drugs were illegal, not including prescription medications which are illegal until prescribed. Important PPL in your life can disappear or die seemingly out of nowhere, which then forever changes you as a person, and your life and world, in unforeseen ways. Waiting almost 20 years to finally make an account with Reddit might have been better left undone. Eliminating all other social media dissolved noticeable depression. 15 years ago, I wouldn't have believed society and culture in the United States could be so desensitized to violence and stupidity as we are today. I didn't believe cars were being made without CD players till I was in one without. Didn't believe PPL like the Unabomber could end up sounding more sane and less violent than certain presidents and congresspeople. Story 31. Learning to ride a horse. It's one thing to go on a toured trail ride with your friends or family. It's 100% another thing to actually learn to manage and ride a horse on your own. And once you get it, it's like an explosion in your mind. You really do feel like you're treating the horse like an extension of your body. You move, and the horse moves. But you sorta have to unlock that ability first. Also, going dead-ass full speed on a horse is simultaneously an amazing, insane, and batshit terrifying experience. Story 32. I'm still skeptical of most supernatural things, but I will admit that there has to be something funky going on at least some of the time. We lived in an older house, floors weren't insulated well, and we would hear someone walking around upstairs. We could tell exactly where they were walking. The steps would go from the bedroom and then down the stairs and just stop. No one was ever there. Just baffling and bizarre. There was some other things too. Here we are at the end. Write your opinion in the comments. See you later.